So if you can integrate people in sports in different levels and different activities, you give them a possibility integrate and to find mentors, to find friends, to improve their self-conscious, to find their own true identity, and to learn about the culture and to find new contacts for future success and so on. And that's why it is very important that the migration and the non-discriminatory principle is very deeply rooted in sports activities. And I congratulate you and the Dynamics on doing this kind of an activity. Then what it requires from the sport itself, it needs the requirement of having the possibility of testing different kind of sports activities. Some people like bowling, some people like football, some people like running, or some people like hiking, or some people what. So you would need to expose the people in different groups and different activities so that everybody can find their own possible way to integrate and enjoy the sports and the physical activities. Then it is important that the activities are twofold. The one fold of them is that gives you the access and possibility on success if you happen to be very successful in certain type of the sports. You could be the top ice hockey player, for example, in Finland. But most of us are not the top ice hockey players. And that's why not to feel sort of stigmatized of not being the best, the sports activities need to include people and organizations like Suomen Latu and others that Lasten liikunnan tuki and others that emphasize the everyday sports hobby and activities without the competitive aspect of it. And what is proven to be very effective in the sports and what needs to be created, and this has been tested with exclusion and people with challenges and threats to be excluded out of the society. You need someone, you need a trustworthy adult, and you need a trustworthy companion. And this is the meeting eye to eye. This is someone you build a relationship. This is someone who really listens to you, who really asks, how are you? Who really wants to hear of your challenges, who seeks the contact for the help or the support or the possibilities for the success or new types of education or the workplaces or whatever that is. So it is a double mentoring. It is the mentoring of the peers. So it is the other young people, a bit like in scout activities, you have the structure, and it is the mentoring of the adult people and those ones leading the sports activity. And those mentors to be effective, they need to be educated. And they need to be educated in the way that they understand and they hold the cultural sensitivity, the zero tolerance for hate speech and labeling, who understand how stereotypes or stigma is born and how they can facilitate the people to flourish, to success, and to bloom. And then again, before I go to the next, and there I'm going through how the EU is going to and try to be supportive in this, is then the platform and the network activity, what needs to be established permanently, and this has been discussed a bit in the EU context too, in this kind of a supportive sports activity system. Nowadays, you have quite often in different silos the people with working with migration, the people working with mental health, the people working with social security, the Rotaries, the Lions, the people working with sports, the people working with work possibilities, or you name it. you would need to have that kind of a supportive network, a permanent platform of these different actor groups who would be in contact of this sports mentoring system and would actively work and support that work. Okay, and this is then the next slide, and now moving to what EU is actually doing. We do not have direct competencies in the EU level on sports saying what the sports needs to do, but we have different kind of activities and financial possibilities. We have the European Week of Sports that allows the different sport organizations and experts and others across the Europe to come together and to develop their strategies, and strategies like this migration and sports together, and how to increase the participation and how to increase the diversity of the participation in sports, not only those ones that are born or native nationals, or those ones that are born to success in sports itself, and to celebrate the sport activity in the communities. Then we do have the EU Sport Forum, and it acknowledges this need for broad policy-based approach to ensure that sporting events continue to be very responsive on developing economic and cultural sustainability and meeting these challenges, and to build the future in sport through high-level dialogue between the sports leaders, entrepreneurs, and other sports professionals, because there's a lot of that what we would need to develop among the people, the parents that are supportive to sports activities, or the spectators of the sports, as we know from some of the football events. And the Be Inclusive Sport Awards recognizes those organizations that are using the power of sport to increase the social exclusion. We do have the Erasmus and sports, and that tackles the cross-border threats to the integrity of this. And what is very important to create that kind of a sport activity I was mentioning to you is, of course, that you have a lot of voluntaries activated and understanding and promoting the concept. And we would need then to promote the voluntary activities, and we would need growing numbers of volunteers with social inclusion understanding, enhancing the equal opportunities and awareness of the importance of the health enhancing physical activity, so not only to be the top sport activity, and the equal access to sports for all, be it then whatever is your disability or ethnic background or economic background or other background. And then the focus should be, and this is the big challenge for us all over the Europe, in grassroots sports. And so this is the European agenda all in all. The following actions are implemented. There are the collaborative partnerships, the small collaborative partnerships, and non-profit European sports events. And there are the links for these kind of activities if you want to find more about them in the future too. The topics that is overall in the sports activity. It is the combating doping and match fixing and tackling the violence, racism, and intolerance in sport. And you can find a lot of materials, you can find a lot of partnerships in these networks, and also financial resources, how to support the implementation of EU policy that relates on the topics what we discussed earlier on in this area. And this is for very important to know about the initiatives to and the financing possibilities, because then when you have a very beautiful examples like this dynamics, it would be very important to broaden its concept, to find new European partners, and to spread this kind of a roadmap for these mentorships, for this kind of a partnering, for this kind of a platform where you engage the actors around the sports to combat the discrimination and to support the integration of the people. And then again, that is the last picture. And now I leave the floor for your questions and comments. Of course, it is the whole science and thinking behind the sports and happiness. It does good for your health, provided that you don't overdo it. It does good for your mental condition. It lifts up your mood. It makes lifelong friendships and partnerships. And as you can hear from this, see from this picture, it unites people from different backgrounds. And suddenly you start being gender or colorblind in positive way. So you start seeing people as themselves, not as examples of their background. Thank you.
All right, great. Hey, welcome and hello again. I'm Pierre Jallo, head trainer for Multicultural Competence Training Program, represented from Helsinki, Namika. And just with this is an important topic for us. Our program was started whilst we were working for young people coming from different immigrant backgrounds across Helsinki to try to integrate them through sports. And with 10 to 12 years experience, came through quite a bit of problems along the way. Fortunately, we were I think smart enough back then to create what is today a cultural competence training program covering not only sports, but all different areas of working life. We hear this saying quite a bit, that sports is the great uniter that bridges many divides. I think Sirpa in her talk said sport is a great tool when the focus is not in competition. But quite often, as professionals, we say, hey, it doesn't matter where people come from. As long as we have a ball, throw it in the middle, kids are going to play, people are going to play with each other. In as much as this is true, and we have seen many success stories where sports has brought people together, we also know that sports is a place for discrimination, for racism, for violence, and all these negative things. And of course, we can hypothesize and make it complicated and say what are the causes of this. And clearly, there has been a lot of research on this. But I choose to, or we choose to, simplify it quite a bit to say, at least for the purposes of this presentation, that two things need to be tackled when we are talking about dynamic partnerships in sports. Because we understand that people are different, and we know that people always overestimate their cultural competence. And I will start with that people are different. You've seen this triangle before of Hofstede's three levels of mental programming. At the bottom, you have human nature. And these are things we all share in common. But this is inherited. We are born with this human nature. And when we move to the middle of it, is the culture part. This is something that we learn from our parents. These are things that, we, in our communities and different environments, we get to understand. And it is very specific to our group, even in our work groups, even in our after-school programs. And lastly is the personality. And this is very unique to the individual, both inherited and learned. And both the culture part and the personality part are areas that really show how different we all are individually, which makes, Safa was talking in her presentation about stereotypes, which makes this idea of stereotypes really crazy, because many times we ourselves say, I was born and raised in Finland, but I just don't feel as Finnish as, you would typically call me. Um, and that is understandable because of the differences in culture, how we were raised, but also differences in personality. No need to dwell on this because I think we understand this part. But when it comes to actualizing it, really putting it into practice when we meet people from other cultures, it becomes this very difficult thing. Um, the second part for with this mock program, what we've been using over the past, say, 6 to 8 years, has been this intercultural development inventory created by Dr. Milton Bennett from the US. So this is a tool that measures intercultural competence, and there's a few of them, but we truly believe the IDI is one of the best out there. And the reason is because out of a series of questions given, about 50, it gives you a result of perceived orientation and development orientation. So perceived orientation is how you think you act when you're dealing with people from other cultures, whereas developmental orientation is how you actually act when you're dealing with people from other cultures. I've been I guess, expert feedback, qualified PA or whatever they call it. And with these results, you give one-on-one feedback as well. And for me, it always blows my mind that I've done this for hundreds and hundreds of people, this feedback. And I have never once seen where the development orientation, which is how you think you act, is bigger than your perceived orientation. Oh, sorry, the development orientation, which is actually how you act, is bigger than your perceived orientation, which is how you think you act. So in short, that we always overestimate how culturally competent we are, and which makes sense. And very quickly, I would like to touch on a couple solutions that when we're talking about these dynamic partnerships in sports, um, whether it is one organization working with another, or within the organization, making sure that all the branches within one single organization are working along together on the same lines. Two things need to happen in our perspective. First, that cultural competence training programs need to take place, and there needs to be increase in representation. And I can touch in very, very quickly from MOC's perspective, what we do in terms of intercultural competence training is we use a little bit of the elements of intercultural competence adapted from the DADOF model, that knowledge, skills, and attitudes are three parts and three aspects that really need to be developed and improved. Now, knowledge being culturally self-aware, being able to understand and grasp global issues, but understanding how language plays part in communication is important. So increasing that knowledge. Skills is equally as important. Listening, observing, evaluating. These are not always as easy as it seems, because how we see the world is only one way and not necessarily shared by everybody else. But these two are almost easy to add, because you can add knowledge, you can add skills, but attitudes is different, because these are things that we were born and raised with. These are things we've developed along the way and truly believe and exemplify these. These are our characters, basically. So working on our attitudes, being able to respect, not necessarily agree, but respect what these other cultures present, how other people act, how other people behave, being curious enough to find out why is it that this person is replying this way, being able to ask self-reflective questions. I think these are all important parts to cultural competence training. But the last thing I want to touch on is the representation. In the Nordics, especially Finland, when we talk about intercultural competence, when we talk about even dynamic partnerships, when we talk about integration, sometimes we leave out this very important part, because a lot of these young people look up and all they see is people who don't look like them, who give them the wrong impression that really they cannot be where they are, because they have dreams in their minds, and these dreams, many of them are curtailed by not being able to see and imagine that they can be in places where they cannot see anybody else who looks like them. And I think we need to do a much better job in our own settings to help promote integration through representation, and being able to understand how to build these people to be much better representatives of Finnish culture in general, because we know it's changing. I think I can stop in there. Is that 10 minutes?
Yes, but if you have something more in your mind, you are more than welcome to say. Otherwise, we will invent a couple of questions to you. Absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you.
Right. Good. If there are no questions, I can very quickly share this.
Yes.
That some of the tools that we talk about, some of them are very short-term oriented, some of them are long-term oriented. But the shorter-term oriented ones, stop, reflect, stop and think, especially in your conversations when dealing with people from other cultures, because this is the foundation of these dynamic partnerships. Because it's people doing it. It's not organizations on that higher level. It's actually people doing these partnerships. And therefore, when you're having these conversations with people from other cultures, stop and think before you believe your own interpretation, because the lenses with which you see the world are not necessarily the same ones that the others have. The second part is, make sure you ask self-reflective questions. Is my interpretation of this situation correct? I feel, that Helena, that you seem mad at me today. Is my interpretation correct? Because most of these are just interpretations, and they can be the stopping points to wonderful relationships and integrations. And last thing, which I will not touch on, is the map, bridge, integrate method, which takes maybe a bit longer to go into. But I think I'll stop there for now.
Okay. So my name is Hanna-Mari Peotta, and I work as a researcher for Likes Research Center for Physical Activity and Health. And my topic today is new aims in sports, inclusion and integration of people with foreign background. And this topic is very much related to ongoing evaluation research projects, which we are doing at the moment in Likes. So first I will present some main ideas of my presentation, so you will get an overview of my speech. So first of all, I obviously claim that sports can contribute to the integration of people with foreign background in 3 different ways. First of all, it's enhancing well-being and especially supporting the coping in a very stressful situation, which adapting to a new society always is. Sport is offering a social setting in which one can acquire important skills and knowledge related to this life in new society. Sport is also offering a social setting to create flexible social identities and enhance intergroup relations. And I will talk more about this later. Then an important thing is that when we talk about sports and integration, we should refer only to a specific target groups. Like also Sirpa mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, it's problematic to see a big category of people with migrant background, and we should in the future pay more attention to this. And then I will introduce a concept called system integration, which refers to a process of organizations becoming more open and inclusive for different minorities. So integration is a relatively new aim in sports and a new way to see the outcomes of sports participation. Usually when we talk about sports, we refer to health-related outcomes. But in Finland, 10 years ago, the Ministry of Education and Culture kind of seriously started to think sport as a tool for integration of people with foreign background. And they actually published a program related to this, and right after started to allocate special purpose funding to Finnish municipalities, and later also to reception centers. The aim of this project was to increase the participation of people with migrant background into local sports services together with the major population. So the key issue here was the contact between minorities and major population. Of course, in the reception centers, the aims were different, but now I'm mainly talking about the project targeted to municipalities, and that's also the topic of our evaluation research in Likes. So when talking about integration and inclusion, which are really much concepts related to each other, it's important to understand what integration means. It's very often misunderstood, and it's understood in a too simple way. So when a person is adapting to a new society, integration means that when a person is adapting to a new society, he should be kind of willing to maintain his own original cultural identity, and at the same time be willing to get contact with the major society and the mainstream population. And this can only happen if the society and its institutions are open and inclusive for different minorities and cultural diversity. So multiculturalism means that the society at the same time is supporting the maintenance of different valued features of all cultures, and simultaneously the full participation of different minorities. So integration can be divided to two different parts: system integration and social integration. And system integration means that the receiving society is taking a responsibility of integration and multiculturalism. So if we talk about context in sports, it means that sports organizations are willing to change their structures, and they are willing to become more open and inclusive for different minorities. And they are willing to become aware of different barriers of participation which different kind of people can face. Also, it means that different people are equally treated in interpersonal encounters on the grassroots level. In our data, in our research, ongoing research project, we have found some problems which are preventing system integration to happen. And one of the biggest problem is that there is a lack of motivation by the management and employees of organization to work towards these kind of goals. There might be also a lack of motivation by partners of the organization, like that the partners are cooperating on the paper maybe, but actually they are not in practice very much committed to work towards these goals. And then also one big problem is that sports and integration is usually based on projects. So they are not seen as a steady, solid part of the organization, but they are seen as a special projects. And usually also people who work for these projects are changing frequently because they don't have stable jobs. They always need to have the funding, special funding for their job to continue. And social integration is the integration we usually think and talk when we are talking about adaptation to a new society. So it's the process, individual process of a person with migrant background to kind of learn or acquire skills and knowledge and values and norms of a new society. And it happens on the grassroots level in contact with different minorities and with the major population. And it's also a dual process. So also native population is learning from minorities. Yeah, I will talk about this a bit more later. Actually, now I'm referring it again. So in our research project, we have been identified how sport can contribute to integration kind of concretely. And we put integration inside the cloud because integration is actually very hard to evaluate. It's a very abstract thing and many factors are influencing at the same time to a process of integration. But anyway, clearly sport is enhancing well-being, and especially if we see well-being from the stress point of view, because we know that adapting to a new society is a stressful situation. Sport and physical activity can be very helpful and beneficial in the early phase of integration, which is usually the most stressful part of that process. Then the next theme we have identified is related to social integration, and in sports, which offers a social setting, there is a possibility to acquire specific skills, knowledge, norms, and values related to this new society. And for example, sport can support language learning. Sport can also teach what kind of non-verbal communication is typical in this new society, how people communicate non-verbally, and also some habits like is it okay to be late or not so okay to be late from the sport sessions, and also specific skills, like in Finland it's highly important to know how to swim, because we have so many lakes here. So it's for a person moving in, it's important to learn to swim, and also maybe to do bicycling, because it's a way to get independence and freedom in one life. yeah, there are also people with migrant background who are not so aware of the benefits of sports and why people should be physically active and why people should eat healthy, or what is healthy nutrition. These kind of things can be acquired in a sport setting. And then the last theme relates to social identities and intergroup relations. And again, here it's essential to see sport as a platform for social encounters. And minorities have a possibility to kind of to gain a subjective feeling of belonging to a new society when having encounters with the majority population. And also the majority population can kind of become or create more like we feeling, like that there are not two groups of people like we and them, but there is a kind of more flexible social identity which is open for different kind of people, and this way kind of all people could feel that they are part of the society. And then on the last slide, I will summarize some lessons we have learned through this research project. So first of all, integration in and through sports should not refer to all people with foreign background, because there are several people with migrant background who have lived in Finland several years, or they were even born and raised in Finland, and they are very much part of the society, and they should be a target group of a mainstream sport project and sport activities. But people with migrant background who are in the early process of their integration may, of course, get benefits from these kind of projects which are targeted specifically to integration. Yeah, because there is also a risk that if we see all people with migrant background as a one category, that in practice sports providers are seeing them also as a separate group of people, and which need or who need separate sports services. And this, of course, is not enhancing the system integration, so that the mainstream organization can think that, okay, we don't need to be more inclusive because the people with foreign background can exercise in their own separate organizations and in their own separate activities. So this is creating the separation of we and them again. And of course, if there is a separate activities for a certain group of people, they don't get in contact with the mainstream population. And so what we want to say is that system integration should be emphasized more in the future when planning sports projects for minorities, and integration should not be seen only as a process of a person with a migrant background, some kind of individual process. It's much more. It's also societal process of inclusion. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you heard what I was trying to say.